I'm Roderick Jefferson. I'm the CEO of Roderick Jefferson and Associates. We are a sales enablement consulting company focused on small to medium-sized companies. And what we do is help them to decrease their onboarding process and also accelerate their sales productivity. There are a couple of things that come into play. If you're a hyper-growth company and you're in the process of doing a bulk of hiring, that's one. The second is if you have these folks on board, or even if you've recently purchased one of the sales readiness platforms and you need some help in orchestration, we're here to help. And the last piece is if you're having problem with churn of your customer-facing folks, we'd love to come in and do an analysis and assessment and to help you understand what is really driving that churn. We recently worked with a content management system, and fortunately, what came out of that is understanding what's going on inside the company. And I think that's where we do things differently. We want to focus on the overall picture of the company, their processes, their tools, their methodology, but more importantly, focus on the people and the culture that come into play. Because every one of our engagements are different, and it all comes down to culture, more so than the tools and the processes. And that assessment covers all of the multiple lines of business. We want to get a full 360-degree view. We talk to the sales leaders. We talk to executive leaders, the multiple leaders across the lines of business. We also went down and talked to the individual contributors. And more importantly, we got a chance to talk to some of their partners and even some of their customers, because there's nothing like putting a mirror up to your customers and talking to them and hopefully getting the same feedback from them that you're putting out. One, they had a single individual that was responsible for sales enablement for 50 customer-facing sales folks, and it's impossible to understand what was going on in all the various regions. This person sat outside of the U.S., and the bulk of the sales folks are in the U.S. So instantly we had time zone issues, and we also had cultural issues. But I think there's another piece, and that was this person was fairly new to the role and didn't have the background, the 10-year experience that I was able to bring in to actually share with them to make them look like the rock star. Well, when we came in, the initial deliverable was the assessment, as we talked about earlier. We always start there to get an understanding of what's going in place. The second deliverable was to create a 0 to XX onboarding, role-specific onboarding program. Now, for the SDR, BDRs, we looked at a 0 to 30 day. We want to get those folks just at a surface level prepared and up and running. For the AEs, the sales consultants, and the customer support and success managers, we looked at a 0 to 60 day. I said 60 instead of 90. In a previous life, we were able to figure out how we could decrease the speed to revenue and time to first close from 88 to 54 days, thus being able to bring in more revenue faster. I believe that it's adoption and execution at the first line manager level, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. We can give you the best process, program, tools, programs, etc. If your first line managers don't own the execution, the adoption, it dies on the vine. They have to be our best friends, and we have to show them where we're going to make life not necessarily easier for them, because it's not always easier, but at least more productive for them. And once we get past that piece, then it's a matter of breaking this down into systematic, what I call knowledge bites. The small chunks and how they will happen in sequential fashion to create a long-term strategy. We show that it's not just about the onboarding piece, but what are we doing down the line for continuing education, and how are we also leveraging the best practices and the tribal knowledge that comes from their legacy folks to incorporate that as well. Once we all agree on the deliverables and the milestones, then we actually work with the first line managers to teach them specifically what we're going to teach the individual contributors, so there are no surprises. We were able to create a consistent onboarding program. We were able to help connect the dots across all the multiple lines of business, even including working on the messaging and positioning updates with the marketing department and product marketing team. We were also able to help them build and up-level their sales enablement function internally. And what that meant was we helped to design what the team should look like. We helped to interview some of the prospects that were to be brought into the organization. And finally, We were a part of the actual interview and hiring process. And then finally, we were able to leave them with a long-term continuing education program that expanded well beyond just the onboarding piece. And it was also role-specific, tied to specific milestones, deliverables, KPIs, and metrics.